Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. I'm sorry we're running a little late today. I'll tell you why in a second. Before I introduce our amazing guest, I want to remind our viewers and listeners that if you join Food Tank today as a member, you'll also get a membership to Slow Food USA. It's an amazing 2-for-1 deal from two organizations that truly care about the future of our food and agriculture systems. And you can go to foodtank.com/join to become a member, or email me at danielle@foodtank.com if you have any questions. So I am really excited about our discussion today and hoping that our other guests can join us. But before he does, I'm going to go ahead and introduce somebody who I've been really excited to talk to, and that's Frank Giustra. Frank is the CEO of the Fiore Group, a private firm managing a broad portfolio of private equity investments and companies specializing in natural resources, entertainment, art, food, lifestyle. He's also founded Lionsgate Entertainment, now one of the world's largest independent film companies. And he's a philanthropist and entrepreneur with a really keen interest in food and farming. He started Modern Farmer magazine, which has been a wonderful resource over the years for so many of us. And he is the co-founder of the Million Gardens movement with Kimbal Musk, who will join us momentarily. Frank, I'm so happy that you could be here. You're joining us from LA today, right?
That's correct. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's so thrilling. And what you and Kimbal have been able to create is something really, really special. So can you explain briefly what this Million Gardens movement is?
Well, it came about, and let me just give you a brief history on it, because it came about as a result of the COVID lockdown back in March of 2020,
Sure.
when our Modern Farmer magazine noticed a real spike in traffic and people that were interested in gardening. And so as we dig a little deeper, we realized that people were looking for several things. One was a way to maintain their sanity during the
Right.
lockdown, and gardening does kind of relieve stress. It heals the soul in many
Right.
ways, and also to supplement their food budgets. So as we looked a lot further into it, we realized that a lot of people were interested in gardening, but many didn't have the resources
Right.
to create their own garden, the knowledge or the resources. That was the inspiration for the Millions Gardens movement, which was also inspired by the victory gardens during World
Sure.
War II, which were again meant to supplement food budgets and to provide, kind of an act of resilience in a very
Sure.
time. So we launched it shortly thereafter, and I was introduced to Kimbal. And speak
Kimbal.
of the devil.
Hi guys, I'm so sorry. Wi-Fi
Thanks.
failed, so I managed to get it working, and I'm on.
Thanks for joining. And go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'll introduce the late great Kimbal Musk.
Well, as I was saying, during that process, I was introduced to Kimbal, and we realized very soon into our conversation that we were, pardon the pun, two peas in a pod.
Sure.
Both very passionate about food and cooking. I love to cook, so Kimball's a trained chef. I'm not,
Right.
but my whole universe is centered around my kitchen. And we're both very passionate about the projects, the philanthropic projects that we're involved in. And we're both not afraid to take risks.
Right.
My approach to philanthropy is an entrepreneurial approach, and so is Kimball's. And so we're willing to take risks. And we thought, hey, we have this Million Gardens idea. Let's do it together. And we made that decision very quickly after our first meeting.
That's amazing. I really like, how this has come together, and you both are risk takers. Let me just take a moment to welcome Kimbal. It's always a pleasure to see him, no matter when he shows up. Kimbal has been a great source of encouragement for Food Tank from the very, very beginning, and for that, I will always be grateful. As Frank mentioned, Kimbal is a chef, he's a restaurateur, and he's a philanthropist. He's the co-founder of several restaurants, as well as organizations like Big Green and Square Roots. He started the Million Gardens movement with Frank. And again, really helping encourage people to grow their own food during the pandemic. I could go on and on about Kimbal, but since he was late, I won't. But I want to thank him again for his constant encouragement. And I'm wondering, Kimbal, if you can expand more on sort of this entrepreneurial approach to philanthropy that you and Frank have really developed together, because I feel like traditional philanthropy doesn't allow for risk taking in quite the same way that you both are approaching it.
I think that's a great point. And let me just echo what you said about Food Tank and how wonderful it is you guys have been going at it for many, many years. As you said, I've been with you from the beginning. I think before you even named it Food Tank. And I've been watching you guys have a wonderful impact, bringing the community together regularly, even during COVID. And I can't thank you enough for that. The world needs you guys, and we really appreciate it. With Frank and I have this incredible bromance. I'll be honest. We didn't even meet physically until the end of July.
Right.
He reached out to me. I'm not even sure the context of it, but it was sometime in right after COVID started, so April or May of 2020, with an idea. And through a mutual friend, the mutual friend felt that I was someone that would be able to, bounce the idea off, see if we could make it work.
Sure.
As you said, I'm very entrepreneurial, and I really love that side of philanthropy. And I think hopefully we bring more entrepreneurialism into philanthropy, because entrepreneurs solve hard problems. So I think it's a beautiful thing. And frankly, you're an entrepreneur, so really there are not a lack of entrepreneurs in philanthropy, but I also think that there could be more. And so Frank and I met, and we saw this absolute need. Honestly, the food security, the government did step in to help, and they did help. But
sure.
In April and May, they didn't know if they were going to help.
Right.
And there was a real fear and a real concern whether people would be able to feed their children.
Right.
Grocery stores were empty,
Right.
literally empty. It was extraordinary. And there was this movement online that Frank told me about, of people reaching out to Modern Farmer, which is his online magazine, to learn about gardening, to ask for guidance on gardening. And what I loved about Frank's idea was, of course, we want to get these gardens into their homes, and they're relatively small gardens. They're something you can pick up at a school and take home. I think we've gotten them into 20,000 homes, which we're very proud of, even during COVID.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is you give a mom or a dad or a child confidence that they can grow. Mm-hmm. They may not have a very big backyard. They sometimes actually do have fairly big backyards. And we've seen families take this confidence we've given them and start to grow in their own backyard in a much larger format.
Yeah.
And the average garden, Frank has given me this data, is about $700 worth of groceries a year. And these are really good groceries. These are nutritious groceries. Right. These are delicious groceries. These are the kind of groceries we want to have. And in many of these food deserts are not really accessible anyway. So even if you had the money, but $700 to a low-income family is an extraordinary amount of money, and it goes towards the best kind of groceries you can imagine. Tomatoes, potatoes. We one of the most fun thing to grow at home is potatoes, and it's not because of the taste of potatoes. It's because when the potatoes are ready, you just dig your hands through the soil, and it's like digging for gold. It is just the most fun experience. Right. You see almost nothing at the surface, and underneath are dozens of potatoes in a very small space. And we did that in March. We did about 7,000 or 8,000 homes with potatoes, and the response was just fantastic, because it's also very easy. There's not much work to do other than water it. And I think that's really what we're trying to do is get people, give people confidence to grow at home. We know they want to. They were reaching out to us. And when you see thousands of people lining up 6 feet apart at a school in their neighborhood during COVID, you appreciate the demand, how extraordinary it is.
Right.
And so Frank and I have worked hard to raise money for Million Gardens to be implemented in multiple cities. Vancouver, of course, where Frank is, Denver, where I am. We have Las Vegas
Nice.
on the roadmap. We have Austin. We have Miami. I'm sure I'm forgetting a city.
Sure.
And it really is extraordinary, the response from the donors to support it, as well as from the families who want it. So you know, it's not often that I find an idea that's better than my idea, because I always have a high regard for my ideas, whether they're right or wrong.
I know you do. I do
you kind
too.
of have to if you're an entrepreneur. And I got to say, Frank's idea was better than my idea.
Go ahead, Frank.
I appreciate the promote there, but listen, just to add some color to some of the things that Kimbal just mentioned.
Sure.
I think, by the way, I'm a numbers guy, so I'm going to give numbers.
Please.
So that $700 of food worth of $700 worth of food produced by the average garden costs only $70 to implement. So it's an incredible IRR.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Kimbal mentioned about the lack of food security during the lockdown pandemic. One of the most staggering statistics that I heard was that 25% of the American population had to rely on some form of government assistance during the lockdown for at least one meal a day. And that to me was just, I thought that, I'm sure the pandemic exposed the massive inequality in our system. And the other thing that he mentioned was the food deserts, which I wasn't aware of before this pandemic hit. But you know that 23.5 million people in America live in food deserts, meaning they live in locations where they don't have easy access to fresh fruit and vegetables. And that's, again, that is one of our target communities, are those food deserts.
Sure. Those underserved communities, for sure. And I want to get into a little bit about that later. Something struck me, Frank, that you said earlier that then Kimbal also touched on. And, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, and, you know, I kind of have a hard time still remembering last year. I still feel like it's 2020 in so many ways. But the panic and stress that so many of us felt around, you know, seeing empty grocery store shelves, it seems like you both have been able to turn that panic and stress into confidence for families to really start growing their own food and build that resiliency. And I'm wondering if we can just dig a little bit more into that and give some anecdotal sort of info about, you know, families you've worked with and what they're telling you on the ground and all of these cities that you're working in.
You know, I can tell you a story. There's a wonderful mother in Aurora, Colorado. It's a poor, low-income community in Colorado. She has two teenage daughters. They were facing absolute hunger and don't know where their next meal was going to come from.
Sure.
And she reached out about the Little Green Gardens, the Million Gardens. You know, the actual starter kit we call Little Green Garden. And it was so wonderful. She grew, got confidence in her first month or two of growing at home, and then reached out and asked if there was a farm that she could volunteer to work on. And so she, over the summer, has been interning at a local farm. And now she doesn't just feed her family, which, to imagine going from, this is it from April, right? So to go from you cannot feed your children to not just feeding your children and yourself, but feeding your community.
Right.
I mean, it just gives me goosebumps to see the impact that this can have. You know, not every family has that level of reaction, but many of them do. And I think that the work that Frank and I are doing is a very small nudge in the right direction, and it empowers families to take control of their lives and grow food for themselves and their family, and in this case for their community. And that change, that psychological change of the mindset is just absolutely extraordinary. Will change her life.
Absolutely. And it is more about it's building resilience, it's building, food security, but it's building community. And I really like that. I want to go back to these little green garden kits. Can one of you explain what's in them and what families and kids are getting from them?
Sure. They're keep in mind, we have to keep them a size that families can carry home.
Sure.
So they're about 12 inches wide, about 14 to 15 inches deep, and they're round, and they have handles, and they're made out of a organic, like a hemp cloth. So they'll decompose without any real effort. You can leave it in your backyard.
Nice.
It's got beautiful soil in it. In the case of potatoes, the simplicity of a potato is extraordinary. You just put one potato in the soil, and it grows potatoes. So you take
it's a miracle.
an old potato, and you put it in the soil, and then you water it, and you wait 2 months, and you have 18 to 24 potatoes in your bag of gold. And
right.
So that's we decided to do that not just for the food, but also because of course potatoes are very nourishing, very high calorie, but also because of that experience where you get to it's almost like a magic trick, just experience something that cannot exist you just don't believe it, and there it is.
I had this good experience, by the way, with my tomatoes. I have a garden at home now, which I started to expand on this year and have it in 3 different locations on my property, growing different things. And I get such a kick out of something that Kimbal just said. I get such a kick out of watching my tomatoes grow. I grow all sorts of varietals of tomatoes, and just to see that the flower and then the green fruit and ripens, and then to be able to pick a ripe tomato. My favorite are the sun golds, which are very sweet, and just take them straight to your kitchen. And I use them to make sauces and all sorts of things. But it is such a cool experience to see something, as Kimbal said, come from nothing to something tangible that you will eat and enjoy.
Absolutely. I kind of think all of agriculture is magic. The idea that we can plant something and something so nourishing can grow is amazing to me, and always will be.
One of the things I would love to respond to, Danny, there was a question that popped up on the chat about could we do this in other countries? And I think there's something really magical about Million Gardens movement, because all you need are the bags, which we can ship very inexpensively if we choose to. We could even have them made locally in any country. They're really very simple. But if anyone is listening that represents a soil company, any soil company in the world could provide soil to a local volunteer. And of course, the seeds are available everywhere. So this is something that, and we need a little time to figure out how to do that. And that's where the entrepreneur angle really will thrive, is how do we empower people around the world, around the country, around North America, around South America, every continent, to take this idea and run with it? Because it's not something that requires us to be physically present in a city, but it does require local lead volunteers. So if anyone's on this thread and would like to offer themselves as a volunteer, and when I say volunteer, you could do 10 little green gardens, or you could do 1,000. You can do, really, it's whatever calls you and whatever your community needs. Please reach out to me at Kimbal, or reach out to Big Green at Big Green, and we will help figure it out. And I'm not saying we know what we're doing yet, but let us know, and we'll add you to our list of potential volunteers. And once we figure it out, we will reach out to you, and we will ask you to help your community.
Sure. One of the things that I find interesting, Kimbal and Frank, is that you're calling this a movement. And I like that in so many ways, but I feel like critics are going to think, okay, after the pandemic, when we're on the other side of this pandemic, finally, and people aren't so stressed out, they're not going to want to grow gardens. And I feel like that's where critics would be coming from. What would you say to them? Frank, you look like you have a comment.
Well, I think, again, so we're trying to create a culture shift, okay? And the idea here is this has completely disconnected from the pandemic, the idea that we have lost our connection to food,
right,
and our food sources. And it's such a simple thing to implement. So we want to just create over a long term, as I said earlier, this is a long-term movement, and it's just to create an attitude and culture shift in how people view their foods and their food source.
That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
don't think food security is an issue that is a COVID issue. I think that it is more extreme because of COVID, but and it certainly is highlighted, not just, of course, food security, but I think that there's a term now that I've heard recently called nutrition security,
Sure.
which growing in your home, growing vegetables is more about nutrition security than food security. So I think that I welcome critics, because critics also can give us feedback and help us improve. So always welcome critics. But I really don't think that this is a COVID issue. It's maybe rising to the top because of COVID, but it is a forever issue. I don't think there's. I mean, I hope there'll be a day when we never, when not a single person in the country doesn't suffer from nutrition security.
Right.
And I hope that happens, but I don't think it's in the short term. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so and just adding to what Kimbal just said,
Sure.
was a recent study, I think it was John Hopkins, that said that you could save 30,000 lives every year and about $5 billion in health costs if people just ate one more serving of fruits and vegetables per day.
Right.
And so that, again, that has nothing to do with the pandemic. That is about nutrition and health. And that's a long-term systemic problem in America today.
Absolutely. One other criticism that I've heard a little bit about is like, okay, this is great. But it's two rich white guys who are going into underserved places, trying to build nutrition security through tiny little gardens. Can this really work? So I want to go back, Frank, to that culture shift that you mentioned, because I'm somebody who believes that if we can shift the culture, if we can change people's mindsets on these issues, that we can make that change.
Let me correct you there, Danny. It's not coming from Frank and I. The
No.
original idea for Little Green Gardens came from Chicago Grows Food, African Americans and minorities, but also some white people. And I don't think white people should be excluded from helping. So Chicago Grows Food were the original idea behind the idea of getting a Little Green Garden into a home. Now they didn't come up with the Middle Gardens movement to do it around the world or do it around the country, but and to be clear, the people who will help in the communities, the volunteers and the ambassadors, will be people that represent their communities. So I just don't think we should exclude white people from helping. I want to make sure that credit goes where credit is due. And in the case of Little Green Gardens, a diverse group called Chicago Grows Food, which is not in and of itself a nonprofit. They're a group of folks that are tying together a bunch of nonprofits in Chicago, and they are absolutely wonderful. We work with them very closely, and we took an idea that they had, and we helped execute it in other cities besides Chicago. But they did Chicago. They probably did, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 homes. We did Memphis. Big Green did Memphis, and we did Denver, and we brought it up to about 17,000, maybe close to 20,000 homes. And we continue to collaborate with them. And they're
watching right now, and they appreciate the shout out.
Oh, great! Awesome, great. No, I think that it's very important for us to realize this is, there's certain strengths that people like Frank and I can bring to the table, and maybe it's entrepreneurial, but it is also financial. And one thing about being a rich white guy is we can support it financially. So great, we're here to help, and we want to do our part. But the other thing that is useful, at least in my case, and Frank, I'm sure is the same case for Canada, is that through my business work over the years, and Big Green work as well, we've gotten to know on a personal level a lot of politicians. We've gotten to know at a personal level a lot of corporate CEOs. And this is a movement that's going to require all of those people to engage. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter what their skin color is. And so I think that it's important for everyone to understand that everyone brings a certain set of skills and resources to the table. And people should do what is meaningful to them. And I think Chicago Grows Food is a wonderful example of, pushing the envelope during COVID. I mean, they did this in in the summer of 2020, right when Frank was talking about the Million Gardens movement, I found out about it through our team because we became one of their partners there, and I was like, that is a great idea.
Sure.
That happens to match up with this Million Gardens movement. Okay, let's see how we can tie the two together.
Well, and it's all about scaling out these projects so that they can have bigger impact. Go ahead, Frank.
No, I was just going to say, and a big part of the plan for us is to do an outreach to local nonprofit groups in each city. I know, for instance, in Vancouver, we already have in mind those groups will reach out to and have them recruit the volunteers that will in turn go out and distribute and educate the local population. So it's really about, we're the idea guys, we're perhaps the money guys, but this is going to require, as Kimbal said, a lot of other groups, including the corporate CEOs and politicians, to make it work.
Right. Capacity building, I'm sure, is a huge part of this. And that's really good to hear. And I want to acknowledge one of our viewers who said, Tony, who said, we need all hands on deck. And that couldn't be more true. The urgency of improving nutrition and food security and solving the climate crisis, which these gardens can be part of. And maybe we can get into that later. But I do want to talk about the corporate side of this. Kimbal, you mentioned, if there's a soil company watching and if they can get involved, you're looking for corporate leaders to sort of step up to the plate and be donors, but also be actively involved in this movement. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to be an absolutely wonderful way for corporations to do volunteer days where they can engage their employees. And we're very good at coordinating that for corporations. That often comes with a donation and that will help not just, of course, the day that they're helping, but they'll help many, many others as well. So I think corporations will be able to do it through sponsorship, which is $1 sponsorship. They'll be able to do it through many times it needs to be an anonymous donation because the corporations want to help, but sometimes it's better to be anonymous. And then they can go to be volunteer days where they can engage their employees. And then there's the more practical in-kind donations. We need soil providers. We need, and soil providers can be very large. They can be Home Depot or Lowe's. They can be very small. They can be a local business that wants to support and wants to provide soil for their community. And it could be a simple, a truckload of soil, which to them is a very small number, but to a volunteer organizing this in this, in a small town in Georgia, that's exactly what they need. When it comes to seeds, we already have support from Seeds of Change and Johnny Seeds and many other wonderful seed companies, but we need more support, and they don't have to be big companies. And again, if anyone is on the call that knows these folks or is listening, reach out to @BigGreen, and we will out on Twitter or Instagram, and we will reach out to you and find ways for you to help. Part of this process is learning how to be effective, but we also kind of need to know what our tools are. If we are told by Home Depot, for example, we'll provide the soil anywhere, okay, that's a tool that we can now provide, or even we'll be the distribution centers because we want a place where we need families to pick up their little green garden. That could be schools, that could be a completely different kind of business that has nothing to do with gardens, or it could be garden centers. So I think we're asking people to reach out and offer help. And then once we understand the offers of help, we'll then be able to work on a strategy in partnership with folks like Chicago Grows Food and many other nonprofits. And by the way, I love how many nonprofits are engaged in this movement. This is not a Big Green movement. This is not a Frank Giustra movement in Canada. This is a movement. This is anyone, an individual, a nonprofit, a school teacher, a mom, anywhere in the world can participate, but we just need to know who wants to help. And so please reach out. Big Green will be a good coordinator. We're good at what we do, but we will not be able to execute this. We will need people on the ground around the country and around the world.
Absolutely. You've had, go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, just expanding on Kimbal's point there about the large players in the gardening industry, whether they're home gardening centers or home improvement centers. or even other brands. Another idea we're pitching is the idea that a percentage of sales of gardening supplies will go to the Million Gardens movement, or a surcharge on all gardening products voluntarily will go to our movement. So that, we are looking for large corporate sponsors and regional sponsors that are in the industry, and I think that will provide a mutual benefit for their business.
Absolutely.
And for what we're trying to achieve.
That's great to hear. You've also had some really interesting success with getting celebrities involved. And when I went to your homepage, there was Harrison Ford staring right back at me. But you've also had Selma Hayek and Zooey Deschanel, who I know is very interested in sustainable food production. Why do you think they were excited to join this movement?
No, I was frankly very pleasantly surprised as well. This was done in March. So these are people I've known. I have good fortune of getting to know folks like that, and I honestly don't really understand how I know them, but it's pretty cool. And my wife's best friends with Selma, so like a few random things that caused them to be at least people I could reach out to. But it was absolutely extraordinary. This was in February of this year, during the height of COVID, where you really had every excuse to say no to join the Million Gardens movement. And every single person we asked said, how can we help? We will show up and we will be there. Just promise us it's going to be helpful. And it was absolutely wonderful to feel the desire for everyone to be part of it. The photographer is a guy named Saint, who is one of the world's, if not the world's best photographer. And he took 6 weeks of his time to put it together to make sure it was done well, and no charge, all to help the movement. And it brought me to tears, the intense and beautiful desire for people to help.
And what was interesting about it, this was at the height of COVID, where people were locked in their homes, and many people were afraid to step outdoors. We reached out to a number of others, celebrities. Both Kimbal and I are well connected in that area, and there were a lot of people. The feedback I had from the folks I reached out to were that they were very supportive, but many just didn't feel confident enough to step outdoors at that time. So I think in future, as we continue to grow this movement, we will, I think, have a lot of celebrity support to just, get the word out and get people to notice us.
Those influencers really help, and they do encourage people and give them confidence that this will work. And I want to go back to this initiative where you're building upon, a previous nonprofit work, and then connecting all these nonprofits, all of these organizations who've been working very hard on these issues, not only to the Million Gardens movement, but to one another. And I think that's very important for building this movement in a way that will be successful over the long term. I don't know who wants to speak to that.
I think it is, having worked in the nonprofit space now for 10 years, there's a natural, maybe healthy competition, sometimes unhealthy competition. And I'm a believer in competition. I think it makes us all better. So don't criticize it. But I do believe that that COVID has just sort of taken the ego out of it and said, okay, how do we help? Of course we want to, if we're doing something, we want to be recognized. We want to have, nothing to a great degree, but something is important. But that's become really secondary or even tertiary. It's how can we help? And it has been beautiful to watch nonprofits from around the country, around the world, reach out to say, how can we help? How can we do this where we are? And we are hustling as fast as possible to give those folks a good response. And I'm actually going to meet with Chicago Grows Food next week to brainstorm on how to help others, help their community. And that's just a beautiful thing. And I think that it's something that is tying us all together. Bonds are forged in battle, that sort of phrase.
Sure.
And we are at war with a virus that is enabling us to forge these beautiful bonds. And I think they will survive after COVID, and we will be a more effective and more productive and hopefully still competitive nutrition security industry, however we want to describe ourselves.
Sure. Well,
So
I mean,
I was
go
gonna
ahead,
say
Frank.
that-
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. Go ahead.
Again,
No, please.
I'm adding to the things that Kimball's already saying, just adding different perspective. But my own philosophy and philanthropy for many, I've been doing this for many years, is never try and duplicate what someone else already does well.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of networking with organizations that are doing a good job in their area, and we're just adding value by supporting them, I think that's immensely important.
Yeah, that amplification I think is so necessary because, as Kimbal said, there has been so much competition, but what we really need is to be amplifying all of this good work that's being done. And I'm so glad you're both here to talk about that. I want to get back to this idea of urgency. So I felt a lot of urgency around our food systems, our food and agriculture systems, obviously before the pandemic, but now I feel it so much more. And I'm wondering, with the Million Gardens movement, how can you describe that urgency while also giving people hope?
I think gardening is essentially an act of hope. I think that it's not something we're struggling with. I think urgency is definitely very important, and as I said, we're hustling to work on what is the correct path forward. There is another thing that I'd like to mention that we are also doing right now, which unfortunately, not unfortunately, it's important, but it is taking it's an urgency above the Million Gardens movement right now, and it's only for the next few weeks, and that is jumpstarting our outdoor gardens in schools across the country. These schools have had 18 months of the gardens not being used. You can imagine how they've mostly been laid fallow.
Sure.
We've been very pleasantly surprised that maybe 25% are actually still very active, and parents use them very much during the pandemic and grew food for their families and their communities. But a lot of them were not, and so the urgency is in our schools to not so much to teach in a garden, but to reduce COVID spread. And it is just a nightmare right now for teachers, and schools are being threatened with closure everywhere. Classrooms in just the first few days of being open are being quarantined. In my daughter's school, she's 9 years old, and the school's been open for I think 11 days, not even, maybe 9 days, and they've had 2 classrooms quarantined already.
Wow.
So it's that to me for the next few weeks is extremely urgent, and we formed a $2 million rapid grant fund at Big Green, $2,000 per school for 1,000 schools. Not Big Green schools. I mean, the Big Green schools welcome to apply, but it's not about Big Green at all. And so I just would encourage anyone on the call here who knows teachers that would like to apply for this grant. We're calling it a flash grant, meaning that there is actually no application. You have to attend 3 training seminars, which are about an hour long each, and then we write you a check. We are going to trust you to use it well, and the checks will be distributed in the next 2 weeks. So it's not going to happen after September. It's simply, this is such a crisis and such urgency, and so I think that urgency is, unfortunately, in a wartime scenario, is kind of decided on a week-to-week basis. And the Gardens movement, though, I think is more long-term than urgent. It is urgent, but it is also something that will be needed forever. And I believe it's a movement that will happen around the world over time.
Absolutely. Frank, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, if I can add one more urgent item to the list. All of the cities across North America will need champions. Now, we already have champions in several cities that Kimbal mentioned at the beginning of this interview, in places like Austin and Las Vegas. I'll obviously be the champion of Vancouver because it's my hometown. But in every city, we need someone soon, because there is a lead time to set up the movement and roll it out in any individual city. So this is, we're calling out for like-minded people that want to sponsor a city, any city in North America,
Mhm.
as a champion in that city.
That's wonderful news. Kimbal, can you tell teachers where they should apply? Is it at Big Green?
Yeah, go to @BigGreen and just send us a message over Twitter,
Right.
or go to biggreen.org and you'll find it. You'll find a way to reach us there. But the email address is jumpstart@biggreen.org.
And Frank, for these champions, how should they get in touch?
Well, I think reach out to partners at milliongardens.org. Partners,
Wonderful.
milliongardens.org.
I think it's millionsgardensmovement.org.
We'll have
It's
to check.
milliongardensmovement.org.
Yeah, it's a long one, but
It's okay. We'll have it correct on our website and
yeah, we'll
our
make sure
article.
we'll double check it and then we'll share it. But and of course, you guys can also reach out to Big Green and we'll pass you to the Million Gardens team.
Wonderful.
Kimbal mentioned, and I just want to interject here. I had a really interesting experience a couple of weeks ago because Kimbal mentioned, this is a war. We're fighting a war against food insecurity and health and all sorts of things. I was in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and I went to visit the last remaining Victory Garden from World War II, which is the only one that's in its original location since 1942, when President Roosevelt created the Victory Gardens movement in order to supplement food, because obviously they had to implement food rations on things like canned foods and meats and cheese and eggs to support the soldiers overseas. So they encouraged the building of Victory Gardens. And at the height during World War II, there were 20 million Victory Gardens throughout the United States.
Amazing.
And listen to this, supplying 40% of the fruits and vegetables that Americans consumed. And so I thought to myself, and I ran into, accidentally, I was just walking through the park, I ran into a woman working in a garden there, and she happened to be the president of the society. So I conducted my own interview of her, and she was telling me that back in the 1970s, there was a movement to destroy the Victory Gardens to build a parking lot, and that this fellow Richard Parker came in and he basically fought against it and won. And it really inspired me, because I thought, God, if Roosevelt could create or inspire the creation of 20 million gardens, surely we can create and achieve 1 million gardens. And I just left very, very inspired.
That's wonderful. And we just had someone who volunteered to be a champion in Providence, Rhode Island. I think her name is Susan. So I'm sure she will reach out. And while I just have the floor for a moment, I do want to give a shout out to the teachers that Kimbal has been working with, and so many other organizations have been working with. They have endured extraordinarily dire circumstances over the last 18 months, and now going back to school. So I just want to, they are all heroines and heroes and deserve some praise for their work during this time. I also want to give a shout out to one of our viewers, Melody, who said garden is therapy. And I think that really goes back to how this conversation began, using gardens as a form of nutrition for sure, but also as a form of stress relief and building that community we so desperately need during these dire times. We are still at a war with this virus, and we need to take measures that will make us all better protected, and eating more fruits and vegetables is definitely one of those. I also want to ask you both, you want folks who are interested in donating from the corporate level to the the on the ground level. What advice do you give them for getting involved in terms of really communicating with their communities and their towns or their policymakers about why this is so important?
Well, at first, I think you have to be as passionate as Kimbal and I are. I think we want passionate people, because it'll be work. Whoever puts their hand up and says, I want to be a champion, So it has to be someone with shared beliefs. And so that I think is, and obviously someone that has experience in, whether rolling out a business or any other type of philanthropic endeavor, obviously experience is important. So passion and experience, I put at the top of the list.
And we just had a question about someone, asking about what happens in rural areas. You're focused on cities right now, but as you expand this, there's food apartheid, food deserts, food swamps, whatever term you'd like to use, going on in rural areas as well. How do you encourage people to start a movement there?
I think that the beauty of this movement is it works in rural areas probably better than it works in densely urban areas because they have more outdoor space. So it's actually not intentionally, but it's going to benefit them more. The nature of the idea is that if you have 100-person town, like truly a very small town, you just need to get 100 little green gardens together and deliver them. I mean, it's actually easier for the rural communities and for the food deserts than it is for densely urban areas where you have to figure out where to grow this thing, and maybe you got to grow it in a windowsill, or you got to grow it on an apartment balcony. So I hope that we get a lot of volunteers, a lot of champions for rural communities. I've no doubt we will, and I think it's a beautiful solution for food deserts, a beautiful solution for rural communities, and I also know that even in densely urban areas, it'll be part of the solution.
That's so great. I'm really excited to see how the movement expands. Can one of you tell folks where to donate, or I can do it?
Go to milliongardensmovement.org, and there'll be a place for you to donate at any level. And just know that every dollar will go towards helping some family out there get a little green garden and get started gardening. The good thing about Frank and I is we're able to provide the funding for all overhead, all administrative work. So every dollar you put in goes directly to family in need.
So milliongardensmovement.org. And again, we'll have that on the Food Tank website. Final question for you both before we end. Frank, who inspires you the most right now? We've gone through, about 19 months of this pandemic, and I've found so many people who inspire me. I'm wondering who inspires you the most right now. Is it a particular person or organization?
Kimbal.
That's great. That's great. Kimbal, now you have to say.
Yeah, I got to say it's Chicago Grows Food and the work that they've done to show us a model that I think is going to be replicable around the world, and it gives me goosebumps to know that it came out of the community.
Wonderful. A huge shout out to Chicago Grows Food. I can't wait to learn more about them. I want to thank you both so much. This has been such a fun conversation. I am very inspired, and I hope our listeners and viewers will be too. Please stay safe and well. The world needs you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Bye.
Bye.